Laura, how are you today, my friend?
I'm great, Rhee. How are you?
I've had a great weekend. What did you do
Yeah?
over the weekend?
Oh, Rhee, my weekend was crazy. I'm not gonna lie. Um, I feel like we usually talk about how prepared I am and I have systems and processes in place. They went up in flames on Saturday morning at the dance studio. I we have three teachers at the studio on Saturday mornings and two in one studio, like co-teaching. And we were down two on Saturday morning. One was out with a concussion, one was traveling. So I got a sub. The sub texted me that she woke up with 102 fever, and I had 30 minutes to get to the dance studio. It takes me 36 minutes to get there. And when I tell you, I raced to that dance studio so fast to teach that baby class at 9:30. Woo! I was like, I flew there. And that started my day. And I was like,
How was the class? Were they excited to have Miss Laura? Or do they even
the
know who Miss Laura is?
they don't know who I am because they're baby babies. That's their first year at Libra. So when I walked in, I'm like, hi, dancers. They all went, who are you? And I said, I'm Miss Laura. Can I dance with you today? They're like, sure, come on. I was like, great. But I was just like, oh my God. Sometimes it doesn't matter what happens, how many, roadblocks you have in the way to like make this situation not be this. And sometimes this still happens. But we handled it. I had like an alumni jump in, teach the first 10 minutes. I swooped in and the parents were fine with it. The kids had a blast, but oh my God, I was frazzled, Rhee. I was like, God, it used to, and like, I feel like early on that kind of stuff happens a lot. But once you get further along, you have the systems in place. But yeah, I was like, oh God, I'm like, this was a lot. It was a wild, but made it work.
When
Made it work.
something happens, I feel this
Mhm.
way. When something happens, it pours. Like it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
we roll along for a nice period of time, and then ba boom,
Yeah.
ba boom, ba boom, ba boom, and I say, okay,
Yeah.
okay, I can handle this. That wasn't how I used to be, but I do it
Yeah.
that way now because I've noticed that it's not inconsistent that it's going to be two or three things on that day.
Mhm.
Like this is going to be one of those days.
Yeah, yeah. But I will say, I haven't taught the babies all year. I used to teach all the babies when I first opened up. So like to be in the classroom with them, like I ended the class and I had to go into rehearsal. So another teacher was coming in to teach the rest of her day as a sub, and I kind of was like, oh, I miss them. Like I miss the giggles and the big smiles as they're jostling across the floor. Look at my skip. Look, I can do it now. Like all of that. I was kind of like all of that joy. That was like, even though it was crazy, like when I got into the studio and I was like, okay, be Miss Laura now, turn it on. It was like nice to turn that Miss Laura on and just be like silly and dancing with ribbons and shakers and they were just giggling the whole time. I was like, oh, you don't get that out of senior jazz, you get that out of
Uh,
creative movement. It's a different type of joy. So it was nice.
back to where you started, my friend.
Yeah, yeah,
Back
yeah. It
to
was
how
nice.
you built your business.
Yeah, truly, truly. How was your weekend though? What did you have going on?
I did a workshop at Dance Masters of North Carolina on Saturday.
Oh,
Studio owners and teachers, it was a blast. I'm starting to get to know the teachers in the area.
uh-huh.
And
Who-
Saturday night, there was a get together. We all went to Michelle Soutier's house and hung out and had some good food, some good laughs. And I'm having furniture built and doing all that stuff in my house. I had a guy who came in yesterday 12:30 to build some shelves, and he was here at 7 o'clock last night and said, I'll be back tomorrow.
Oh my God. Oh,
Listen, I wanted him to get it done, and I was feeling bad for him because they wrote on my thing it would take 2 hours, and he warned me ahead of time. He said, this is going to be a lot longer than 2 hours.
Yeah.
But at 7 o'clock, I kept trying to find things to do while this guy is building the shelves. He goes, I'm done for the day. And I go, oh, okay, no worries. I'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
I wanted to go cook something to eat. I was like, okay, I'm done with this, even if it's not done. Funny.
Yeah.
So
and is it starting to feel like home? Is it starting to feel like home with all of it now?
Yes, and it is coming together. It's literally starting from scratch, but yeah, in the last week or so, it's starting to feel like home. I love it here.
Good. That's
so, everybody, we have Jason Pickett with us today.
Mm-hmm.
You may know him from Instagram and lots of other places. Coffee Talk is brought to you by the Rhee Gold Company, and you can learn more about what we do at rheegold.com. And we will be back with Jason right after this message that I can't find. Here it is. That was not the message. This join us this summer for the Dance Like Teacher Conference. Welcome, Jason Pickett. Those of you that are watching us live today, feel free to send in some comments, some questions, thoughts on our discussion. Jason,
hello.
Good to have you on board, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to Coffee Talk. We did a recent interview for another group, and I feel like you are really good. You are a really good interview, my friend. So I'm ready to roll today, and I believe Laura is as well.
Yes,
but
I'm
going to start off with something that I know is true about you, and I would love our audience to get to know you better. Your journey into dance was a little bit different than everyone else, my friend. Tell everybody how you came into this beautiful world we're all in.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very different. And I talked about it with you, and then I just talked about it yesterday. Yesterday I was saying that, like, even now I still feel sometimes like an outsider when I am at events, or I'm doing things, or I'm hearing other people kind of talk, and I'm like, man, I really do kind of share very different opinions. But I think it's mainly because I did come into the space from a very, very different perspective. I started dancing when I was around 14, 15. It's a little blurry because I came into dance very organically. I started going to, which I'm not advocating for, young dancers to start going to parties, but I started going to parties around that age, and I started seeing people, and the people that were getting the most attention at the parties were the people that could dance really well. Everybody would kind of circle around them, and, the girls would be interested. And so, I took it upon myself to, like, hey, I'm not super athletic. I don't play a lot of sports. Maybe this could be my thing that kind of, is a good conversation starter. So I went home and just kind of started doing my own thing in my basement, and just started, watching dance movies and music videos and people on YouTube. And just, you know, I don't know. I just something in me thought that I knew what I was doing. And then it dawned on me like, hey, you know, I don't know what I'm doing. So I should teach other people how to not know what they're doing. And so I knew a girl who taught at a studio here in Utah. It's called Inspire Dance Studio. And I reached out to her. I said, hey, I'd love to teach. And she said, okay, I'll get you in touch with the director. I went in, did this terrible interview where I like taught this. I showed her like some of my choreography. And somehow, some way, she was like, I think it was a little bit of desperation. She was like, you know what? I need a boys rec teacher. So you can do that. And I was like, all right, amazing. I'm here. I did it. I'm a teacher now. So I started with that. And what's interesting is I was kind of growing as a teacher and as a dancer alongside the kids that I was teaching. Once I started getting into the competitive side, because at first it was just recreational, I started going to conventions with the studio. I started, you know, going to all of the competitions. I started taking all of the master classes that the kids had to offer. I started taking other classes at the studio, like that, you know, on days that I was free. And so it was really this sort of like journey of me finding dance and getting better at dance while also teaching at the same time. And so now I think the benefit is I don't have a lot of those like sacred cows that you can sometimes develop when you come up in a studio, but there's also plenty of, you know, things that I am not familiar with or maybe not as strong at that I would have had if I had gone that route. So that's kind of like the early on journey. And then I was able to do some professional work via the network that I was able to build of just other teachers and choreographers in my area. And all the while, content was a huge component of what I did. I had an extremely large ego early on, and I thought everything I did was incredible and everyone should see it. And so I recorded everything and I did concept videos and I did these really, really awful videos, kind of like how I do now, but they were just very out of touch and not very relatable. But it was, you know, that was me cutting my teeth and preparing for everything that I do now. And so I think it was, you know, everything's meant to be and everything works out the way it's supposed to, but it definitely was a very different journey. You know, making that jump from street styles and the freestyle community and battling, you know, directly into the studio rather quickly.
Jason, how did you like, so you went into, like you're saying, teaching at the studio. Did the first studio you taught at, did they have you co-teach? Did you observe classes? Like, how did you figure out how to structure? Because I know it's one thing teaching a group of girls. It's a different animal teaching a group of boys. So people might be like, oh, I'll give you the boy rec class. I think they're harder because their energy is so much higher. And like, to me, that I think that's a hard class to teach. So how are you able to like figure out early on how to even structure that class to make it a studio type dance class? Did you?
Oh, I had no idea. I had zero clue. I mean, this was the really great thing. Like, I don't want to paint a bad picture of the director that I was under, because everything that the choices she made was like what led me to be able to be the teacher that I am today. Yeah. And it was basically like, here's the things you should not do. Other than that, do whatever you want to. Build this program however you want to. And so very quickly it grew from, you know, okay, recreational, the boys started getting into it, and we moved it into a competitive team. And then we started, you know, sweeping competitions. Every competition we would go to was like first overall. And it was a lot of just like a lot of mistakes, a lot of like just really poor teaching methods. But it was also a lot of just where I came from. We freestyled a lot. We worked on grooves a lot. I encouraged the kids to, like, every single one of them. It was so cool thinking back on those days. Every one of those boys was like such an individual. I had a 9-year-old that was really into breaking. And so I set him up with like a break dancing teacher that taught privates with him. And he could do head spins for like minutes, like just endless amounts of head spins at 9 years old. And then I had another dancer who was really big into popping and waving. And so he went down that avenue. And then they all kind of came together in these pieces that were like very highlighting of their skills. Right. And I think that's what made it so cool, is it was like I didn't know how to make a piece. So I was just like, okay, this kid knows how to spin on his head. This kid can do flips. This kid can like wave really good. So let's just do all of that on stage and like
Right.
hope it works
Yeah.
out. And yeah, and then it was the same thing once I got into the girls teams in the competitive side. It was just kind of like, do whatever you want. Like I did all the pieces for, we had about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 teams at the time. I did all of the pieces, all of the cleaning. And so it gave me so many hours and so many, repetitions of how to create a good piece, how to create structure, how to put the music cuts together. That by the time I kind of went outside of the studio, I had a formula-ish of kind of how I did things.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I think that's one thing that I will say that I got from my home studio. I did a lot of co-teaching and assistance since I was like 10. So it was, I don't want to say it was an easy transition because it's different going from an assistant to a full teacher and having your whole syllabus and running your class. It's a different beast, right? But I feel like I was way more prepared because I had that. So, I mean, like, that's why I asked that question. I can only imagine how much harder that was to figure out that structure of how
there was no preparation, but I've always kind of been like, just like into the fire I go. Like every single thing that I do, that's like go in and I don't look back. And I have this weird thing where I don't like to be the worst at anything that I do. So whatever I have to do to figure out how to be, not even necessarily the best, but just not the worst is what I'll do. But yeah, it's always been just jump in the fire and then hope for the best afterwards. Even now, I prepare. I think people sometimes think I'm joking. I prepare nothing. I prepare absolutely nothing. When I set pieces, when I do choreo, when I do classes, the most I'll have prepared is like maybe some formations and the music cut that usually gets done the night before. But everything else is just like, and I think it comes from those early days where it was just so organic and so like free flowing that now it's just, that's the only way that, like, the idea of like, because I have friends that plan everything. They have like journals with the choreo that they're going to do and every move is written down. When I think about that, I'm like, no, thank you. It's I don't even know what I would do. I don't even know where I would start.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a type of being a type of artist because I'm very much the same. When I have I'll come in with an idea, and I'll come in with music. Say for my senior minor, pieces always have a very clear idea, topic, theory, something that's going on in the world, and that's what it's about. But my girls know, they stand up, I'm like, let's go, and they stand up against the back wall, and I push play, and I hear the music, and I look at them, and I see them doing things in my brain. And if I've tried to like fight against that, I'm like, maybe it would be better if I come prepared. And then I did a class where like I had all these ideas and wrote it all down, and I watched it. I was like, that's terrible. I'm like,
it doesn't work,
terrible.
and then you get frustrated because you did all that work to put it together, and it doesn't work, and then you're like, and then,
And I was like, this is better if I do it on the fly.
It happens when you do what I do and you're speaking and you go in and you got up at 5:30 for your 9 o'clock session because you wanted to check your notes, make sure everything is right.
Yeah.
And then you get in there and you're like, this doesn't feel like it's the right vibe. It's like walking in sometimes and just saying, what is the vibe of this hour going to be based on where everyone's at sometimes is better than all the planning in the world.
100%.
I want to tell you something, Jason, about something you said a little bit earlier. You know that, yes, your journey was different and you got thrown in the fire when it came to teaching. But I believe that teaching dance, none of us were good in the beginning.
No.
I think it's an evolution. There is not a person that teaches you how to pass on movement. I believe it's this like discovery process. Because I, like you, I started teaching at 15. I, like you, thought I was awesome. And I look back now and go, wow, I can't believe I said or did some of the things that I did in an effort to be a good teacher or believing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this dance teaching process is an evolution that takes several years.
Yeah.
To become good at, and then you're always going to have to continue to learn because it's always evolving.
100%. Yeah. So
I'm going to jump to this question just because when I think of you, I think of this. How do you think social media is impacting the current dance world? I'm going to say I was thinking about teen dancers when I asked the question, but just the whole dance world.
Yeah. Man, I was actually just talking about this with somebody the other day. I think unfortunately I am leaning a little bit more these days towards it being more of a negative than it is a positive. And the reason for that is because what I'm seeing behind the judges table as of the past year or two is I'm seeing a really big disconnect between music and movement. And when I boil it down and I think about why this is happening, I think it's because we're so hyper focused on the end product and we're so focused on, what is or what isn't, or what is cool or what's not cool, or what's current or what's not current, that we're kind of forgetting about like the antithesis of what we do in the first place, which is the music. And I think that it's a result of people seeing pieces online. You have these artists like Paris Cav and she's the first one that's Project 21. You have these incredible, people that garner a lot of views and a lot of eyes. And the problem is we're not taking inspiration from those people. A lot of times we're taking mimicry and we're taking replication and we're taking, I've talked about this topic from a music standpoint before, where I think a fatal flaw that some teachers make is they see a piece at a competition and they like the music or something and they go, oh, I love that. And then flash forward a year from then, and they're coming up with their pieces and they go, oh, I saw this amazing piece, at competition. I loved the music, so I'm going to use that song. The problem is now you've taken something that was in the zeitgeist of that particular moment and you've brought it a year later. So now it's almost outdated in a sense. It's no longer new or innovative because you've brought it a year later. And so I think social media has exaggerated all of those things. And I think, I remember being younger and my inspiration for pieces was very minimal. People weren't really posting competition pieces or studio classes like they are now. So it was very much like if I had inspiration from something, I saw it one time. I saw it one time at a competition and it was a flash moment and I got to just take whatever I could kind of replicate or be inspired by. Now I can sit and rewatch the same piece over and over and over again and see every single little nuanced detail. So I'm seeing that disconnect on stage. I'm seeing these pieces come out where you can tell that the something along the process went towards what can I put into this piece to make it cool, as opposed to the music is really cool. So just dance to that, just move to that. But I think again, because of this hyper fixation on the moves and the choreo that we have nowadays with social media, I think that that's kind of where it's coming from. Outside of that, I think it's fantastic. And I think it's an incredible tool. And I think it's so connective. And I think it has created a whole new pathway for dancers and for choreographers. And I can attest to that because it's the pathway that I chose to take. And for that, I'll be forever grateful. And I think it's an incredible tool. I just think, one of my favorite sayings is like, Spider-Man, with great power becomes great responsibility. We have this tool that has so much power. We have to use it responsibly, and we have to know, what we're consuming and how we're consuming it.
Mm-hmm.
When you're saying moves,
Mm-hmm.
you mean tricks, I'm assuming.
I do. Yeah, definitely. That's definitely a big component of it. I think the person I was talking to, we were actually judging together, and he said he used the term empty technique. And I think that's a really encapsulating term for what we're seeing right now. Is we're seeing a lot of empty technique. We're seeing a lot of technique that's placed in routines without purpose. And I think sometimes when I speak on this subject, people assume that I'm like an anti-technique or I'm anti-tricks. It's not that at all. It's just that, to me, that's not the dancing. That's, if you Google the word technique, it's how you do something. It's not what you're actually doing. So I think we've taken this how and we've turned it into the what. And there's a disconnect when you do that, because, as cool as these things are, if they're not kind of wrapped in goodness, then they aren't consumable. It's like, it's like eating a raw ingredient. It's probably not going to taste very good to just like shove a clove of garlic in your mouth. But when you mix it with other things and you boil it down and you heat it up and you put some other things in, now we've got something that's really going here. So I think that we've taken the ingredients, we've pulled them out, and we've just kind of put them sporadically in places. And it makes it challenging for the kids. It makes it challenging for the judges to consume. And it honestly makes it hard on the teachers too, because when you trust the music, and Laura, kind of like what you were saying, when you trust the music and you just let it go, a lot of your questions get answered because the music is telling you what to do.
Yeah. The music does lead you. And I feel like, Rhee has said, you've said this, this is one of your quotes. It's like, did the music really tell you that should be 16 fouettes with a double and a jeté out of it? And I was like, when I read that quote from you years ago, and I was like, no, the music really has never ever told you that,
There's probably no music that says that. But yet someone sees it or imagines it.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a tough time with this because I believe what's really missing is our ability to dig deep inside of us and create art.
Like I think there's a lot of vulnerability there.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go for the vulnerability part, but we need trendsetters. We need those who will be vulnerable and bring something to the table that's different. That isn't. It's like we can't all be the same. We must turn around and go, that was cool, that was different. Otherwise, we're not moving. We're not moving forward.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that I see nowadays. There's a handful of choreographers who have really interesting approaches, and I distinctly remember the first time I see their work, and I'm like, I don't know if I like this or not. I don't know if I'm into this. And then the more you see it, and the more you kind of it pops up, you're like, okay, I think I like this now. And then you start to think about it more and more. But I think that's kind of what we're missing, is we're missing those artists that are willing to make something that maybe not everybody does like, and not everybody does want to reshare or comment on or consume, because those are the things, those are the pieces that make us go, oh, that's interesting. And then, your take on it might be a little bit different. So I think there's a lot of factors at play, but I think the reason why I'm so a little bit dark on social right now is because I think it has exaggerated some of these problems a little bit. It's increased everybody's, or I should say it's decreased everybody's confidence. It's made people way more, way less willing to share because the risk of people not liking it. And I see this with my own peers. I have friends that are incredible artists, and they are so terrified to put things out, and they do so much prep work, and it has to be so perfect. And if it's not perfect, they don't post it. And it's like, when we didn't have social media, you didn't have that opportunity. You went, when I was starting out dancing, I always tell kids this, like, the cypher was your competition stage. The cypher was your litmus test of, is this cool or not? And the cypher will tell you if it's cool or not. Because if you go out with the coolest thing you came up in your basement and you bust it out at a party and no one does anything, well, then you know that it wasn't that good. But you didn't have time to, you just did it. It was all real time. And vice versa.
Right.
If you came out and you laid something out and everybody went crazy, then you knew, okay, I'm on to something. That aspect has kind of been stripped away because now we can prepare so much and we can prep so much and we can put out the very, very perfect version of our art.
Right.
But, that's not interesting. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not
And
cool. The finished product isn't cool. The process is what's really intriguing.
And don't you think that goes back to maybe dance sometimes being seen too much as a sport and not an art?
100%. 100. I particularly, I'm very hardlined on the sport conversation, that I do not think that dance is a sport at all. I think there's way too many things that stack up against it being a sport than there are things that stack up to
make it.
The only thing that really does is like the team aspect, I guess, and potentially the competitive aspect. But even the competitive aspect is so far from any other competitive arena that I just don't think it's, and I think when you go down that road, you take away all of the things that are inherently dance. You can't be objective with culture. And that's what dance is its culture. And you can't be objective with that. It's very personal.
Right. And I tell, I'm sorry, Rhee, go ahead.
No, I'm passionate. I think, Jason, you and I, we got a lot in common, a lot of years between
100%.
us, so we have a lot in common. If we refer to what we do as a sport, doesn't mean that dancers are not athletic, in great shape, physically, mentally, etc. We eliminate the art form. I mean, you go and you watch the Olympics and they say 30 seconds, 15 seconds before it happens, Susie's going to do a triple, quadruple, da-da-da-da-da, and it's never been done before. And then she falls, and it's no artistry whatsoever. And I don't want to see that happen in dance.
No.
Yeah.
This is so interesting that you bring this up, because I had someone say something so interesting to me the other day, because we were talking about tricks, and I was like, just the same conversation, why are we putting tricks that the kids can't do? And they said, well, think about Simone Biles. She does these incredible tricks, and a lot of times she doesn't stick the landing, but because the difficulty is so high, she ends up outperforming everybody else. And it was kind of this moment of like, man, that's what we're seeing in dance, is we're seeing people that are thinking that difficulty is what's going to get them to where they want to go. And that's not always the case, because especially as a competition judge, a lot of times difficulty is not even on our score sheet, or if it is, it's one component. The execution is really what matters. And if it's not executed, I tell kids this all the time, and I'll say this in feedback when I'm judging, like that the turn that you just did, it's not really doing anything for you, because there's elements that you're doing well, but then there's elements you're doing not correct. So they're kind of negating each other. And now we just have a move that didn't add any value to the routine. So, and the thing, this is what bothers me too, is you'll see it on the kids' faces. And when I work with dancers one-on-one and I watch their solos, and I go, I know what it is already. I know the answer, but I'll go, what issues are you having with the routine? And every single time it's either a trick or a piece of technique. And I go, I can see you preparing for that trick throughout the whole entire routine. It's affecting the whole entire routine.
Yeah.
And my next follow-up is take it out. Tell your dance teacher you can blame it on me. I'm not going to change it right now, but go to your dance teacher and say, Jason said that I need to take this out, and put it 100% on me. And every single time they come back and they go, I went to my teacher, we changed it, I feel incredible about the routine now. Those singular things can make a difference in how that kid performs the routine. And it's something I'm very passionate about, clearly, just because it's heartbreaking to see when a kid is putting themselves at physical risk or mental risk because they have something in their routine that they're not capable of doing.
Yeah. I mean, we were all dancers. We all know when we're going out on stage and we don't feel confident about one thing. And you can feel it in your body. It's coming.
Yeah, boils
10 more
up.
seconds. It's in 5 more. Yeah. And like, you can see it even like, I mean, this month we're prepping for comps. We have gala in February, competition starting in March.
Love that. Yeah.
So January's been full of like private lessons with Miss Laura. Even though I'm not your choreographer, I've had like 25 private lessons in the month of January, like just every single weekend. But it's interesting when I watch them, it's like they could be performing, and it's like 3 seconds and their face goes, prepping for whatever it is they're going to prep for that they are so nervous about. Yeah. And then they do it a couple times and it's the same thing. I'm like, we're going to change that. I'm like, do you feel comfortable with that? They're like, no. Okay, well, it's January. You're going to go on stage in 6 weeks. So if you don't feel confident and comfortable right now, let's change it. And then whatever we're going to change it to, you now have 6 weeks to put it into your body and feel good about it. Or if it's something that you already know, because we're doing it across the floor in my jazz class, let's change it now. And then you have time to work on it. It's consistent. And they feel so much better. And it's like, and then you're not in the wings as a choreographer going like this. It's 50-50 chance if they're going to get it.
Yeah.
And then they're on stage feeling that too. Like you want everyone to feel confident going out on stage, yourself as a teacher and choreographer and the dancer.
Yeah. And I think it comes back to like, I also, because I do like to preface this, I just also have a personal opinion when it comes to solos, that your solo should not be something that's a push for you. It should be challenging and it should be something that, you grow into. But in my personal opinion, by the time you get to first competition, that solo should feel 1,050%. There should be nothing in that solo that you don't have. And I know that there are, and I can understand it. I know there are some teachers who feel opposite of that. I just take it from a consumer standpoint. And I think these parents are paying way too much money for their kid to look bad on stage. So, it should highlight them.
Yep.
Don't show the judges what your dancers can't do.
Yes.
And I know you're right. There are some people who believe differently, but I look at it where I'd rather see this dancer totally confident and I have no concept that she can't do 4 pirouettes.
Yeah.
Because I've fallen in love with everything else you've showed me on this
100%. 100%.
And I wish we could do more of that. Sometimes I want to say the influence comes because a mom will come in and say, how come she doesn't have this in her choreography? Or,
it 100% does. It does. I've had it happen to me. And I think the key here is integration. That's what I always kind of come back to is I'm not anti-tricks. I'm not anti-technique. It needs to make sense. If there's something in the routine, it needs to be capable and it needs to make sense. I don't care if you have a bunch of tricks in your routine. Honestly, I don't. If they all make sense and you're using them well and they go with the music, that's fantastic.
Okay.
But what I don't need is you to be dancing and have this incredible moment of performance for 3 counts and I'm in it. And then all of a sudden you slap your hands on your legs and you run into a brown duff back handspring. I don't need that. I don't need that. And you've now kind of what happens to me sometimes when I'm judging is I feel like I'm in a washing machine and like I'm in it. And then I'm like dropped on the floor and then they get me back in it and their performance starts to rise and then they drop me on the floor. And it happens in those moments of tricks or technique. And so instead of me kind of being like this throughout the routine where I'm just growing and I'm anticipating and I'm like, yes, it's just this constant up and down. And now what you've created as a choreographer and as a dancer, you've created a if only situation. You've created, if only, you did this a little bit differently, this would be incredible. That's almost worse than just a bad routine, because now as a judge, I know what you can do. And I know that there is a really great mover and a really great performer there, but you're not giving it to me. And that almost becomes a worse score than if you just had a terrible routine to begin with.
Mm.
I think that's a good thing for everyone to take in consideration right now, it being the beginning of comp season.
Yeah.
To really, like, over the next few weeks, really look at all of their dances and just look at it with a different set of eyes.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like I've been
That's a
trying
huge
to do.
component to this as well, and it happens from a parent standpoint and a teacher perspective, and it happens to me when I'm just watching a routine and I'm not judging. It's a completely different set of eyes than when I'm judging.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm judging, I'm looking for, those transitions. I'm looking for those, are your feet pointed? Are your knees straight? I'm looking for all those little nuances. And so sometimes I don't think I know, because I used to do it as a teacher. I would watch my pieces from a teacher standpoint, and I'm like, that was incredible. That was the greatest routine that's hit this stage today. But from a judging standpoint, it's like, no, it wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't strong in these areas. So there's a lot of nuance around this, and that's what makes competition so difficult. And then you sprinkle in a little bit of personal opinion, you sprinkle in a little bit of all the judges coming from different arenas, you sprinkle in all the competitions having their own structure and their own set of points and rules and rubric, and you sprinkle all those things in, and you just get a kind of very gray cake that is sometimes really, really hard to know what to do with.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, but I want to say something. It's hard. It may be hard to deal with at times, but I know what I'm about to say. There'll be people who disagree. Why does it have to matter so much? Meaning, we're dancing. This is how this competition does things, but that isn't like the reason we're going. We're going to dance. We're going. I don't know. Did I make sense?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think time and money is probably the first two things that come to my head.
Yeah.
I think there's so much time and so much money put in that when you have the combination of those two things, there's a certain expectation of return. And when that doesn't happen, then I think that's where issues arise. And I think that we're getting now into the meat and bones of why competitions are hard, is because, I'm not advocating for competitions to not make money. That would make no sense. But it's hard. It's a hard situation.
Mm-hmm. I feel like maybe that also comes down to, I think, the studio culture. Like, what is the teacher saying in the classroom? How are we? What's our mindset walking into this competition? I expect you to wipe the floor with everybody, or we're going here. We're prepared. We're going to give our best. But I want you to also look around and be inspired. I want you to see what other people are doing. I want you to look around, and you're going to come back and tell me one routine that you loved this weekend that wasn't a Libra dance studio.
I love that. Yeah.
Tell me, and I think that's something that we could do as studio owners and teachers
100%.
to help, because I know, like, when I go to competition and I'm standing in the back and I'm watching other routines, I'm like, wow, that was amazing.
Yeah.
I love how they use that prop. I loved how, I'm like, but I'm thinking to myself, does everyone feel that way? Do my students feel that way? Do they think, oh, they're so good, they're definitely going to win because they do an aerial in their dance? Like, I'm like, what is your mentality? I think that we can be a little bit more responsible with helping guide them through this process of the competition world.
Yeah. And I think early on in my teaching, I was very much what you first described. I was so focused on the win and so focused on that pressure. And I think as I sort of grew and developed and matured, I think I realized that it wasn't that big of a deal. And now I tend to approach it more from win the audience and win the other dancers. If another dancer is familiar with your studio, or they're, familiar with you as an individual, and they stop what they're doing to come into the auditorium to watch you perform, that's a win. That's a win.
Yep.
You did something right. Even if you don't place well, if another parent from another studio, is talking about your routine and how incredible it was, that's a win. So I think there definitely can be a cultural shift there to where we're not taking away the competitive aspect, which I think is an important component for these kids to have. But I think it's taking a little bit of pressure off the win because it is so differing and it is so opinionated.
What's your perception of the competitive? We can't take away the competitive side of it. Describe what you mean in the context of that.
I think competition is really important. I think competition is something that is a really valuable and undervalued skill, and I think that it plays to your advantage later on in life so much when it's harnessed and when it's taught in a correct way. I think when you understand what competitiveness is, you can use that in any aspect of your life. Again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like I did a year with a professional company, and there was a little bit of confusion / naivety as to what I did. The director assumed that I was an all styles dancer. And even though I informed him multiple times that I was not, and that first ballet class was when he really realized what he had gotten himself into. And I remember being in that class, and there was no slowing down. There was no like, okay, let's get Jason caught up. All these people had been on the company for several years. They did the same ballet combos every single day. It was a very advanced class. I remember looking around that room the first day and going, okay, like, who's the worst person in here? Who do I need to outperform? Because at the end of this season, I'm not going to be the worst person in this room. And I did every single thing that I could to not be the worst person in the room. And it helped me so much in my dancing. But I think if I didn't have that competitive edge that I kind of have, it would have crushed me. I would have been like, I can't do this. I can't perform with these people that have been studio dancers their whole life. Like, I'm not going to tour around Germany not knowing how to do anything. And so I think competition is important, and I think it is a really valuable skill. I think it can also, just like anything, there has to be balance. If there is no balance, then we run into issues.
Yeah. So that brings me into a different topic. I feel like the collegiate nationals is like our Super Bowl in a lot of ways. That's what I refer to it as at my studio. Sure. Yeah. And I feel like the artistry there this year was amazing. And the jazz and the lyrical category. Oh my God. Like, just so out of the box, and the lifts and the well-placed tricks that were on the music, on like hitting the different notes as they were doing it. It made total sense. As a professional performer, a choreographer, a dancer, a judge, what do you see maybe pieces missing in our junior and senior and high school dancers that you could say, hey, studio owners, teachers, I feel like we can start focusing more on these things to help them either, one, dance professionally, or two, make these now incredibly high level college dance teams? Because I mean, a lot of people right now aren't even going to school for dance. Their goal is to get on a college dance team. They don't want to be a dance major. Yeah. They want to be a finance major. They want to be a doctor, but they want to be on that competitive
they want to go on
level dance team. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, this is an interesting shift, because I don't think it was like that 10 years ago. This is a
No, this is something that's been recent, and I think it's going to be I think it's going to get even bigger. I've kind of foreshadowed for a few years now. I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, but the fact that these teams aren't documenting the whole entire year leading up to nationals, to me, for the schools, is such a big opportunity missed. Because if these schools would put a little bit of funding aside and start documenting OSU's journey to nationals, and they have a couple of people on the team that become the headliners of this mini series that they put out on YouTube, I mean, kids would go crazy for that. Kids would be all over that. And it would make nationals even bigger, because now we have a skin in the game. We have it's like sports. Why do we like sports? We like sports because we know the players, because we know their backgrounds, we know their wives, we know their kids, we know what they're doing in the off season.
Yeah. Well,
But
Cheer did that with Navarro on Netflix. They did the whole backstory, and like the Cheer program started to explode years after that. And like all these gyms started popping up around me because there was an interest in it.
Yep. But to your question, I think whenever I have conversations like this with kids or studios, I think the first step is, what do your kids actually want to do? Because as we progress and as things get bigger and better, like we're describing with collegiate dance team, what that does is create more separation. So if you look at a collegiate dance team dancer and a professional company dancer, those are two extremely different artists, extremely different. The way they're built is completely different. The things they're strong at are completely different. I'm not saying you couldn't cross over, but I'm saying that there's a big, big difference between those two. And if you look at a typical industry dancer who's doing film and TV and music videos and touring with artists, that's a very, very different dancer than what you see on dance teams, like an extremely different dancer. And so you have to figure that out first. What do these kids actually want to do? Because if they do want to go on dance team, then your focus needs to be on performance, acro, and technique. If you don't have those things, those are expectations now. They're not bonuses. I did an interview with a coach here she's the coach for Weber State's dance team here in Utah. They're a great team. And she was like, we don't even like having all of your aerials, front aerial, left aerial, right aerial. We don't even ask. It's just assumed that you have it. And if you don't have it, you're not even moving or past the first round. So it's at this point, it's like, you have to know where these kids want to go, because these dancers, I mean, we talk about I'm not the biggest fan of technique and tricks, but I also can't sit here and not watch these kids do some of the turn sequences they're doing and go, I mean, something about that is really cool. It's not my cup of tea, but I mean, I'm also not doing that ever. Like it's like some of the, if you just step back and look at the physics of some of the things that these kids are doing, it's like kind of mind bending that they're even able to do the things that they're doing. So these are like elite level, I think in that arena, they tend to lean in some of the people that I know that do dance team at a high level, they are athletes. They're like extremely athletic, muscular, like built people to be able to do the things that they're doing. So I think that's the biggest thing is, and this is a hard conversation because it means that studios kind of have to be okay with kids that don't fit their studio culture. I think you have to know what you can offer and what you can offer, and you have to be confident in that. Because if you try to, and we're seeing this a lot right now, if you try to play to everything, you end up playing to nothing, and you end up with poor quality classes. You end up with programs that aren't super successful because you're trying to give these kids every opportunity in the book, and you just can't do that. You have to kind of know, this is our thing, and there are those studios. I have a couple of kids that I work with that go to those dance team studios, and that's their focus. Their focus is dance team. For them to get a kid on OSU or Minnesota or LSU is like the equivalent of getting their kid on stage with Taylor Swift. That is their like claimed, that's their thing. And so I think more studios now more than ever, and I love that you brought this up earlier, have to figure out, what is your mission? What is your culture? What are your goals? And is everybody on board with that? If all of those things are checked off, then you can have an extremely successful program, because that's what we're moving towards. We're moving towards a time in dance where we're going to see many more specialists than ever before. Because you have to be in order to get into some of these arenas. If you want to go into the industry right now, if we talk about LA specifically, if you want to go on stage with an artist, your hip hop needs to be strong. You need to really understand what you're doing, because these people that are going on tour with these artists, they are like incredible street dancers. They're not just, good dancers. They're incredible street dancers. If you want to go on Broadway, everybody's getting better in every single arena. Everyone's getting better. So we're going
Yeah.
to start to see more specialists as a result of that, because in order to crack into these arenas, you're going to have to be a specialist. You're going to have to be able to go to dance team and go, look, I'm the best Turner acro dancer in the US. Put me on the team. You know what I mean? It's hard. It's really hard right now.
So do you think the time of creating like well-rounded dancers is like diminishing and
I
being
think we don't
more
have the time to
specialist?
do it anymore. I think that's more so what it is. We don't have the time to do it. Before, you had the time. Now these kids are getting to levels of success way earlier than they ever were. So, and I think it's too, again, it depends on your arena. What do you want to do? Because there are still some arenas where being well-rounded pays to your advantage. But you can ask any dancer in LA how many times they've been asked to do a turn in the past time they've been living in LA, and they would probably have very few times to even bring up. And I think before, it was this idea of if you were well-rounded, you could book more jobs because you had more available to you. But I think, again, the problem now is everyone is so good and the expectation is so high. It's not, casting agents and teams and companies are not looking for the bare minimum anymore. They're looking for the best of the best. So if you're not the best of the best, then, it's going to become tricky to get into those spaces unless you have a really, really good network.
Yeah.
Wow.
And again, this is, obviously, but just so I can verbalize it, this is my opinion. This is my kind of
I get it,
of where we're going.
As you were talking, I was thinking, I think that, in my opinion, I might be able to prepare a dancer for either side.
I think you could too.
I feel like it could be, if this girl's dream is this way, I guide her in that direction. Or this guy's
I think you could too.
Yeah,
I don't think it's impossible. I just think it's, again, it's I think it's really important just to know like what your kids want to do and then what your strengths are, and make sure you're supplementing outside of that. Because if you have a kid that wants to go on dance team and you're not a dance team person, then you need to find someone that is.
Agreed on that one.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like too, as studio owners, and the longer I've been a studio owner, I'm 14 years in, you have to be okay with someone being at your studio for 8, 9, 10 years, and then they realize that studio is not their flavor anymore.
100%.
That doesn't mean that the studio has to change and bend over backwards and change your flavor.
No.
It's okay to say, I got you here. I'm proud of you. Go fly. Go fly. I've had you for the first 12 years, 10 years, 8 years, whatever it is. And I think that's a hard pill to swallow, especially 100%. Early on as a studio owner and teachers and all of that. Because you're like, oh my God, but she can do that because of me. She can do that because of, you got her there and she wants to keep going. And if she's in an environment where kids who don't want to do that, that's hard as a studio owner.
Yes.
You know, iron sharpens iron at some point. You got to keep, like she has to be in a room where she's going to get pushed even more of the people around her too.
100%.
Like I think that's something we studio owners have to like be at peace with sometimes.
Well, it's to your point, it's incredibly hard because, again, if we go back to this sports conversation, one of the big things that differentiates dance from sports as well is there's no sport where you spend the amount of time that you do with a dance team with one team or one coach. If we think about football, you're on a city league for a couple years. Then you go to junior high, you're with a different coach, a different group of kids. Then you go to high school, you're with a different group of kids, a different coach.
Yeah.
Dancers are with the same teachers, relatively speaking, in the same environment with the same kids for sometimes 15, 16 years.
Right.
That's unheard of in any other element of life, really. Like so that's why that's, to me, at the core of why there are some of like the systemic issues of studios is because of that thing. And we can't change it, obviously, but that's going to always pose issues when it comes to people. It's hard for these kids to leave. I speak with a lot of parents that are like, I know that I'm not in a good space. I know that I'm not in a safe space, but my kid doesn't want to leave. they have friends here. They don't want to leave. What do I do? And I'm like, well, you have to make a decision. Are you in it for the friends, or do you actually want your kid to grow? And that's a hard decision to make. It's a really hard decision to make. And that's kind of what you're referring to as well. I had a studio reach out to me really recently, and they were like, hey, my daughter, she's the best one at our studio. There's no one else that touches her. The other kids don't like her because she's so competitive. What do I do? And I was like, you may need to send her somewhere else. I mean, I know it's your daughter, and I know this was like your life goal of having her at your studio, but if it's not working, it's not working. You can't, you know, sometimes kids are a good fit elsewhere. And I think there's a lot of power in making that decision as a studio owner. I think that speaks volumes to the parent and the kid of, oh, wow, like I truly was in a really safe space that was looking out for me for this period of time, because now they're not upset at me that I want to move on, but they're helping me and facilitating it. And they're going to go on to, you know, even if it wasn't a good fit for them from a customer service standpoint, they're going to go on and tell everybody they know about that incredible experience they had with your studio. That's going to pay you back tenfold. So I think those types of decisions are really hard when it comes to studios. And I totally understand that. I totally understand that studios don't function as similar to a traditional business model as sometimes normal, because there's cash flow issues and there's a lot of different things on the back end. But I think there's a lot of customer service and customer relations things that studios could start implementing that are hard to implement at first, but they really would change a lot of turnover issues and retention issues. Yeah.
Okay, we have talked it out this hour.
we've covered the gamut.
Everything.
I said it was going to be a good interview. It was. Jason, I think you're awesome. I love your what's the word? Authenticity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I might not 100% agree with everything you say, but you have a damn good explanation for your belief, and I respect that 100%.
Yeah.
I don't want everybody to. It'd be no fun if everybody just agreed with everybody. You know?
Right. Different flavors for everybody.
Yeah, and you're a good flavor, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Laura. Thank you all for viewing today, and those that are watching on demand. We appreciate all of you. Have a great day. Enjoy the journey.
Bye, guys. Thank you.